Welcome to Success in Motion. Join us as we dive deep with top leaders, entrepreneurs, and professionals, uncovering strategies to grow, scale, and succeed.
Hey guys, welcome back to the Success in Motion podcast. I'm your host, Michael Bishop, and I'm joined here by John Williams. John went from working on a farm to working in law to retirement. John is retired from law after only 43 years in that field, but he still does things on the side. So don't let retirement fool you. He's still giving back. He's sitting on several boards of directors and also has a role with the company that he was working with previously. Well, John, welcome to the show.
Well, thank you for having me.
John, you have had a long career doing a lot of things. And before the show, we were talking a little bit about some of the weight that comes with being in some of those high positions, serving on some of the boards, serving on as leaders of some of the different organizations that you've been in. Just the weight of having to watch what you say. Are you representing yourself? Are you representing the organization? How has that been challenging for you to keep that straight and not embarrass yourself or the organization that you're representing?
You know, I knew early on, and it may be because I grew up in a real small town. There were like 28 in my high school graduating class. That's how small a place. And I understood the dynamic of saying something and word spreading pretty quick. You know, the old story about if you got in trouble, word of what you did got home before you did. And so perhaps it was that experience of growing up in a real small place to understand how small the world is and to be careful of what you say. And to understand that the title you hold doesn't come off when you're off duty. It's the same as being a lawyer, but when you're in an executive position, you don't go home and Velcro off the title. People associate you with that, whether you've got a coat and tie on or whether you're at a wedding or a social gathering. And always be mindful that the world is not full of people out looking to cause problems, but the world has enough of those people in it that you want to make sure that you don't give them an opportunity to play their A game on your reputation.
Yeah. Do any instances come to mind where you've been in a situation where maybe you said something that was taken as more of an official capacity, but it was meant as a personal conversation?
Oh, yeah, a time or two. I had said something personally on my Facebook page, and I had the general counsel and vice president of a huge oil and gas company here call me and said something about it. And I said, well, you know, that was on my personal social media page. Now, I was off duty. And his response was, you are never off duty. And yeah. That you are never off duty, which is true. And that was a pretty good lesson to learn earlier.
Yeah, and how did you come back from that? Because I know over the years, I've heard a lot of cancel culture, right? You say something about something that is politically charged and people run with it, especially if you have a high profile, if you're in charge of something, a business, a group, an association, something like that. People try and cancel people all the time. How did you overcome that and come back from that little social media blunder?
Well, the first thing I did is, you know, somebody who was an acquaintance, somewhat of a friend. The first thing I did is I kept my tone civil and professional. You know, this person wanted to call and make allegations, and my response to it was, okay, that's the way you see it. was not the way I intended it. It was on a pretty important subject. It's something that was associated with the work I was doing professionally. But I think the first thing is to respond to an allegation like that, whether it's true or not. Stay professional, be kind, don't up the heat on it. You know, if I would have said, "Oh, well, that's none of your business," or "I'll do as I will," that sort of thing, that just challenges people to take it up a notch. Just say, thanks, my friend, for the heads up on that. I'll certainly consider what you had to say about that, and maybe some good advice. And I appreciate you taking the time to reach out to me. Doesn't cost you a penny to be kind to people.
Yes. Sometimes we we allow our temper to get the best of us, and we throw water on a grease fire, thinking that we're going to put it out, but really it just makes it explode, right? And so,
Exactly. And I often tell people it costs you nothing to be kind, but failing to be kind at times can cost you everything.
yes,
If that makes sense to you, there are times when you're failing to be kind can take a situation to a point of no return.
yeah, and maybe you are human, and maybe you have an opinion and you put it out there, and the world doesn't like that. That's fine. Like, you can be a person. You can make mistakes. You can put things in into the world that maybe you shouldn't have put out there. But really, what defines your character is how do you handle that situation once it's out there? Because we're all going to make mistakes. It's all about how do you pick yourself up? How do you recover? Are you just going after people and going to like stick it to them because they need to get out of your business, or are you going to handle it professionally? Are you going to handle it in a way that the next time you have to interact with that person, they want to interact with you?
I think Winston Churchill had some of the best advice on that. He had some pretty cutting things he said about people. But when England was in its greatest and most dire straits during World War II, in the address that some say the English language just went to war, when he said that this will be our finest hour, it was a terrible mess. It was a horrible situation. But his message is this will be our finest hour because we will persevere through this. We will pick up. We will not panic. We are not going to be irresponsible. We're going to move forward, knowing it's going to be tough. And that's kind of in those situations where you end up with what I sometimes call a little corporate quicksand, wiggling around and rather than stopping and thinking and being strategic and saying to yourself, I will get out of this. This will be my finest hour. I'm not going to achieve that wiggling or struggling unnecessarily. I'm going to be upfront about the situation and find my best way out of this.
Yeah, I have found that being straightforward with people, being open and honest, is really the best way to get through a challenging time. A lot of times, it's just a difference in perspective. You see it from one angle, and they see it from a different angle. You are trying to give a certain message, and somebody else interprets that as being something completely different. And so, just coming forward and being like, "This is what I was trying to do with that. Maybe I misstepped there, but this was my intent," goes a long way to softening some of those hurt feelings, or transgressions, so to speak. So, John, you've been in law for 43 years. I'm sure you've had tons of ups and downs. What would you say was the highlight of your career?
Oh, probably the time I spent at the Bar Association and moving the association into now this century. But coming in and the place that had 3 previous executive directors in about 3 years, there'd been turnover, a couple of deaths. Staff had been pretty much running the place without a boss. The physical condition of the place, tons of deferred maintenance, asbestos. The computer system, no, this is an association then with around 15,000 members, over 18,000 now. But the computer system consisted of 5 big desktop computers, daisy chained together, sitting on the floor.
Okay.
I opened the door and I looked at this and I said, oh my goodness, somebody could trip and fall and wipe us out forever. There were literally 5 desktop computers that were daisy chained. And for folks who, that's old technology stuff, they were basically connected together. I mean, it was a very makeshift, what we would now call a network, but it was 5 desktop computers sitting on the floor in a basement.
Nice. Well,
below the water level.
yeah.
The day that we installed the RAID rack system and the environmental controls with redundancy and got all that stuff off the floor and actually had real servers, that was a pretty proud day. I mean, you understand that moving from that primitive of a system to what at the time was state of the art, I felt pretty good about it because the most valuable thing we had was our data.
Yeah. So I want to dig into that a little bit because there's 2 ways you can look at that. One is okay, you're updating the equipment, you're getting it more streamlined with modern technology, you're getting it to a safer position. But I want to look more at what did that do to the whole organization from a okay, this guy's serious about what we're doing. You came in, you saw a situation, you took charge, you got it organized in a way that it should have been set up from the beginning. What did that do to the morale, to the whole feeling of the company?
That took a while. It's interesting because what you're really talking about is culture change. And I was just emailing and texting with a friend of mine who's recently gotten onto city council about culture change. And a lot of the experts say it takes about 3 to 5 years to change a culture. You can do it quicker, but you have to move fast and you have to give people an opportunity to get on board. But yes, it definitely changed the culture. When I came, there was resistance because I represented change. That's what I had done in the 2 previous organizations that I'd been at, had been identified as a change agent, as a change person, and found out that I may have had some strengths in that. The one thing when you come into a new organization like that, and I'll tell you in a minute if you want to know about a couple of tests that I do, but the one thing that you have to be certain of when you come into some place like that is, one, to be as inclusive as possible, to bring on as many people, but you can't be wrong.
Yeah.
You can't fail. You can't have failures. You turn that staff into your enemies. The old saying is that the people below you fire you. It's just the people above you acquiesce to you. So I was working for a board of 17, and over the top of that were 9 Supreme Court justices. So there was a little bit of a bureaucracy that I was working in. So you needed to bring all those people along. You needed to bring in governance, even the thoughts of the Supreme Court plus 50 employees. And you had you had to remember that all of those were your customers, plus 15,000 lawyers whose money, as Michael Collins says, that's my economic driver, is the membership dollars. And so you've got all of these constituencies, and they're all looking at you, and they're all affected differently. And you have to make each of the cogs you put in place responsive to their different needs. When you want to go spend $1 million on bringing up software and computers, and that budget's approved by the Supreme Court, you have to say to them, these members are members because of your order. You have charged us with doing this administrative work. Here's how this gets the work you want done right. You go back to your members, and here is efficiency. Here is a way that you can go online and perform these tasks. You sell time for a living. You remember, always, lawyers must sell time for a living. So anything you do that cuts time out is basically a rebate or money in their pocket. So then you have the board that you work for, and it's, how are you going to look? Because people on boards, they want to have a good appearance. They don't want to look bad. How is this going to happen? Because they want to know some details, and you get them comfortable with it. And then you've got the staff who's going to do implementation. And first of all, you have to convince them, or most of them, that it's a good thing to do and that they can do it. And when we get through, we're going to have victory. And in leading change, there's 3 kinds of people in an organization. I should say that when we're talking about bringing people along. There's 3 kinds of people, and I've seen this. I've been through organizations with big change. 3 kinds of people. There are the people that will moan and gritch and get on with the program. There are the people who absolutely 100% are opposed to anything that you're doing and will leave. And then there are the people who will never get happy and who will never leave. And if they stay long enough, they will make themselves physically ill and your organization sick. Sometimes helping those people go find their next career is life-saving. I know of a situation where a guy who was just so upset and so opposed to some change that was going on went home one day for lunch and had a heart attack and died. I mean, he was that worked up. And you can go check your employee records. Your people that aren't happy, they're out on sick leave more. Maybe they're sick. Maybe they just don't want to come to work. But either way, they're out on sick leave more. And when they're there, it's like trying to build a brick wall. And for every 3 bricks you put up, they come and take 1 down. And so that makes your organization unhealthy. And so in change, you try to eliminate those folks by bringing everybody on, by not letting them create that for themselves. But it happens. I don't know. I've kind of gotten far afield with that on my philosophy on that. But when you're going to change a culture, you have to change people. And the best way to change other people is to change yourself. To change yourself into what you see the solution needs to be. And earlier, I think maybe before we started, we were talking a little bit about kindness. You don't need to come in like the new sheriff in town and put people around and push them around. That's not leadership, that's bullying. You come in, you listen carefully. I always try to make a rule of wait about 6 months before I got out the big plans. And one of the first things I do when I come into an organization, and if I'm talking too much, just stop me. One of the first things I do is called a reverse progress test. And I use those huge Post-it notes. I don't know if you've ever seen them. They're on a tablet that's like a legal pad, but only it's 3 feet or 2 feet by 3 feet. And it actually has a sticky. It goes up on the wall. I'm sure you've seen those. And at the top of it, I draw a T, just like the letter T, a capital T. And on one side, I put a plus, and on the other side, I put a negative. And I do this early on, and I ask the staff and the employees and people who have been there, if I was going to destroy this place, how would I do it?
Okay.
And I put that in the negative. And then I do the flip and turn it to a positive. And it does a couple of things. I have staff agreement on what behavior is damaging to the organization. And I have a story, we probably don't have time for it, where an employee found out that involving herself in behavior that she'd earlier told me would destroy the organization was not a good career move. But
for sure.
So you make up the rules of the classroom when you're doing this. You have buy-in from the people. For instance, one of the first things that when I went to the Bar Association, the staff said would destroy the place is bad financial controls. Okay, so over on right-hand side, under the minus, I wrote bad financial controls. Over on the left-hand side, under the plus, I wrote great financial controls. And then the other thing I do to look at just how siloed people are. Organizations today, because jobs are pretty specific and specialized, and in any organization, you're going to have somebody who's doing something unique that nobody else does. Whether it's the guy who's mowing your yard or trimming the hedges, or the CEO, or someone who does some outlier. Anyway, you're going to have people that are going to be separated, sometimes physically, oftentimes just in their job classifications. And when you're trying to change a culture, you got to bring everybody along. So the other thing I do is I get out index cards and I ask everybody to give themselves a grade on how well they do their job. On the front side, and because lawyers and a lot of law schools do 12-point grading systems for A plus and A minus, or you use plus and minuses, whatever. It's not a trick. I'm not trying to identify anybody's handwriting, but I want you to put your grade down. Flip over the card, and I want you to give the organization a grade. And undoubtedly, what you're going to find is a lot of people are going to say that they're A or B plus players, and that the organization is a C or a C minus. I hope not a D or an F. But you're going to find that all these people, and then my question to it is how can I have all these A players and a C organization?
It's everybody else's fault.
Yeah. Well, where's our synergy here? Why do I have all of these A players? Imagine that your report card said that you got an A in every subject, but at the bottom of it, it said that you were a C student. Makes no sense.
Yeah.
And people are not going to own that they're C players. That they're not. And, nothing wrong with that if it's their honest thought, even though it might not be correct. But the truth is a lot of these folks are fairly talented and good, but they see their job as what they gave themselves an A or a B in, and not the whole organization as their job.
Yeah. I want to touch a little bit on something you said a few minutes ago about changing people. I once heard a quote that it's easier to change people than it is to change people, meaning it's easier to change who you're working with than it is to change the person as an internal changing them, right? So get new people versus changing what's there. And it talks. I bring that up because you were talking about the three different types of people, and you have the people who are making themselves sick because they're miserable, they're not happy. How do you go about identifying that those people need to go, and not just selfishly, but for them, let them go find something that's going to make them happy? How do you identify that? How do you make that decision, and just what's your process in general on that?
Well, first I make my objectives and directions clear to give them a solid idea that this is where we're going. And I don't say, if you don't go there, you need to go get another job. But that's fairly apparent at some point. I have not had a lot of experience in in changing out people. I had, 20-year employees, even longer, had lots of long-term employees. And with a lot of institutional knowledge and a lot of job skills, and getting rid of all of those folks would have been a very bad mistake in my mind, because they had the institutional memory. They knew why we did what we did. My job was to help them do it better. But for the folks that just couldn't get on board, and I had one, they usually will end up doing something that is a firing offense. I don't know how else to say it. They usually will end up, and a lot of times they'll do it on purpose. They sabotage themselves, but they end up doing something. And you can't let them do that and everybody else see it. If you're trying to change a culture and move it up to excellence, you can't let consistent bad behavior be tolerated. They use the word fair. To me, it's not good business. It's just not good business to have a person, a piece of equipment, a process, whatever it is, that continually fails at the mission. And so those folks who are not bought into the mission will fail at it. And I'm not sitting around waiting for it to happen, but it happens.
Yeah, the reason I'm touching on this topic is because this actually happened to me, right? I got into a job, I had the golden handcuffs, I was doing well. I was number two in the company in my position, right? So I was doing fairly decent at my job, but I was miserable. I came in, I was gaining weight, I was having health issues left and right. My body just started rejecting whatever I was doing to it because I just wasn't happy. And so I wasn't doing the things that I needed to be doing. And my manager, he saw what was happening. He's like, Michael, you're doing a good job over here, but you're miserable. You need to go find what's going to make you happy. He actually gave me 30 days to go do that. And personally, that was one of the biggest gifts to my career that I've ever received. It told me that, one, stop being complacent. Two, don't be comfortable, right? Because although I thought I was comfortable, my body was telling me that I wasn't comfortable. And so I was able to get out of that situation. I got into a field doing what I actually love doing. I got super passionate about it. I got healthier. I got my life in order. I have more energy. I have more time. And it's game changer when you get out of something where you're miserable and getting into something where you actually feel like it aligns with your personal core values and your personal mission. And so as leaders, we need to be able to identify those people. And yes, it's going to be painful. Yes, they might be doing very well. They might be bringing in a bunch of revenue for the company. They might have all the information that the company needs. You have to find a way to offload that and set them free. Help them go find. It sounds terrible to fire people, but to me, that was the best thing that ever happened to me was when I got fired. And so if you're out there looking at this and you're saying, oh, I have this employee that I just can't get to do what I want, or they're miserable, rip the band-aid off. Go and give them the blessing of freedom. And they will land on their feet. It might be painful, it might be a challenge, but go do it. Um, because you might be the one that's holding them back. And just like John said, you're causing them to poison the well. Well, you're allowing them to poison the well and themselves by cutting them free. They can go and flourish somewhere else. They'll be happy. Your organization is going to be happy. You can all grow well apart a lot better than you can together sometimes. Now, when you have people who get the culture, they want the culture, they have the capacity for the culture, jump all over it and do everything you need to do to keep them involved and engaged. But the ones who are those poisoning the well, you got to figure out how to move those guys quickly.
And it's an act of kindness. It doesn't seem like it cutting off somebody's livelihood, but you brought up the fact that being trapped in a job where you are unhappy physically affects you. It will shorten your life. It will put a lot of spiders in your head. It is not good for people. One of the things you have to remember about people is that we're animals. If you take any animal and go cage it, it paces the floor and it deteriorates. This is a little different dynamic, but there is some definite biology and medicine involved in people staying in positions for where they continually fail both themselves and the mission of the organization, and their job every day is to come to work to make everybody as miserable as they are.
Yeah.
And
let's change gears here a little bit. There's a buzzword that, and I love getting this, having this conversation. There's a buzzword going around. We like to call it work-life balance. You've been in some pretty high positions. You've been over a lot of things, the Oklahoma Supreme Court being one of those in the organization that you were working in. That's a lot of pressure to give. But you also have a personal life. You told me before we started now that you're retired. I know that you like to go and do some fishing. You like to go and do some learning about different things and growing crops and things like that and just enjoying life. Is work-life balance a thing to you? And if so, what does it mean to you?
I don't know that it was that much of a thing to me. I love what I did. Being a lawyer, working for all the lawyers in the state, I was always with my friends at work. And there were lots of long hours, lots of evening events, weekend things, and those kind of things. And so I kind of flourished on that, but not everybody does. And I tried to watch out for my employees. And sometimes people would come to me and say, gee, I really hate to have to ask this, but, it's my daughter's softball game and I'd really like to go. And I always said, yes. If your family doesn't come first sometimes, I don't trust your priorities. And so, and I didn't have a family, so a lot of that work group was family. And so it depends on the job that you have. It depends on what you want to do. If I had small children at home, I'd say this to my employees and I'd take my own good advice. You need to spend some time with your kids. And There are times that it's critical at work that we have something that's mission oriented that has to get done. And sometimes because of that, we miss some things, but don't miss everything.
Yeah.
I've seen people use work as an excuse not to engage in their life. And work-life balance, I think it's about who you are, what you need to be doing, who you need to be taking care of. And one of the people you need to be taking care of is yourself.
Agreed.
And take a snapshot, sit down and look at it and say, if this was my best friend or this was my brother or sister, and I saw them in this snapshot, what advice would I give to them about their work, their career, their life? Because we can be much better at telling other people that great advice. Because I've done that to a ton of people who came to me with problems. And I said, if I came to you with this problem, what would you tell me? And they gave me excellent advice. And then I said, why don't you take your own good advice and go do what you just said? And I think that's how you do work-life balance is you sit down, look at your life, and give yourself the best advice that you've got. Give yourself the advice you'd give your best friend or your spouse or your sibling. And then wear that, take that. And in this day and age, we have lots of employees taking care of elderly parents. And I've always told the employees, go do that. You got one shot at it's a lot of times the parents have reached the point that they're near end of life, and go. You got one opportunity in life to do this. Don't have regrets. Go do what you need to.
Yeah, I think there's definitely a season for getting things done. And there's definitely a season for taking care of yourself, taking care of loved ones. And so I don't think it's necessarily a pound for pound balancing of those, but it's definitely a be where you are when you're there and make sure that you're giving attention to where it needs to be. And so if you're at work, be at work. If you're at home, be at home, right? Learn how to turn your phone on to silence or do not disturb. Learn how to go and find some activities that bring yourself joy. Doing this podcast is one of those things for me that I get energized by doing these interviews. And I love being on here with you guys and sharing these messages and having these conversations. So definitely find the balance that works best for you. Well, as we're wrapping up our interview today, John, what exciting plans or initiatives do you have in the works for the next 6 to 12 months?
Well, I think we previously talked about I've bought some property down on the coast that I'm in the middle of, and I apologize. I had somebody text me during this about the status of a project that I'm working on down there. And right now I've got all my gardening and full bloom, and I'm growing for the first time this year Cherokee purple tomatoes that I'm pretty excited about. And working on stuff at the theater where I serve on the board and another board I work on. There's always time, and whenever there's a brief moment as one of my dogs comes this way, they're always, speaking of work-life balance, they're always needing some attention too. So, and to be ready to meet any challenge that comes along, if I can be of help to somebody.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for your time today and sharing some insights and tips with us. If people would like to connect with you, get to know you a little bit better, what should they do?
I'm on Facebook. I don't do a lot of social media, but I'm on Facebook as just John Williams in Oklahoma City. And that's probably the best. And my personal email is williamsj success95@gmail.com. I used to worry about giving that out, but I've had so many notifications of my data having been stolen at various databases, including my social security number. I don't worry much about my email being out there, and it's williamsj95@gmail.com.
Well, there you have it, guys. This was a fun and exciting conversation with John Williams about a lot of things, but most importantly, culture change and ensuring that you are driving the culture that you need for your organization that's going to drive it forward. And don't be afraid of change. Thank you guys for joining us today for this episode of the Success in Motion podcast, and we'll see you next time.
Thanks for tuning into Success in Motion. Want to share your story? Visit successinmotionpodcast.com/guest to apply and be featured on the show.